Hi gaming guys, and welcome to episode 9 of Import Nights, the review series for GranTurismo's selection, a very strong and massively popular one for JDM performance cars. And in this particular pick, as you'll have seen of course from the thumbnail and the title, we are featuring one of the most popular cars in this entire series, and one of the most popular cars on GranTurismo as a whole, and one of the most respected Japanese cars ever made in real life. The Toyota Supra. The newest shape Supra available in the game. This particular model is the RZ model. There's also the SZR, which is far less powerful, but is also a good car in its own right. Its performance is good, it's just kind of overshadowed quite easily due to its performance. This car though is very popular on GT6, and it's not hard to see why. In terms of bang for buck, it's very difficult to beat. In fact, technically, it's actually even better value than the Nissan GT-R or the Toyota ZZ2. In fact, in terms of sheer performance for money, this may even be the best car in the game, because for 43 grand you get a car capable of 290 miles per hour. Now the GT-R is quicker than that, but it also costs around 30 or 40 grand more, which in other words is roughly double the price. So although the GT-R is fantastic value, if you're talking pure ultimate performance for the lowest price possible, this really is kind of unbeatable, especially if you compare it to something like an exotic from say Europe or America. They typically do cost, in the case of America not as much, but especially European exotics or vehicles with similar performance will cost you a lot more to get this kind of performance from. Now the Supra is hugely popular, and for fans of the car, you don't need me to tell you how good it is. You already know. On the game, this car can be tuned to utilise primarily, for sheer straight line performance that is, the mid-range or top-end turbo. It can be tuned in terms of gearing to work well with either, and it will give you similar performance with different advantages in different ways. Overall, the top speed tends to hover around the same kind of region, regardless of whether you use the mid-range or top-end turbo. It just gives you slightly different specs. Now speaking of spec, this car has a 3 litre turbo engine, puts out, in the case of its highest turbo form, which is the mid-range, 944 horsepower, slightly less with the top range turbo, but still gives you roughly the same top speed. In terms of torque, this car puts out 993 foot-pounds. That's quite a lot. In fact, that's one of the highest torque outputs, especially for its engine capacity, in the game. In terms of weight, it's a little bit heavier than some, but still certainly not overly heavy at 1208 kilos. That extra bit of weight though does hurt its power to weight ratio a little bit more than you might expect. With well over 900 horsepower on tap, you'd probably expect the horsepower per tonne to be extremely high, and although it is very high, it doesn't sound as high as you'd probably hope. 781 horsepower per tonne with the mid-range turbo is certainly very good, but doesn't really sound as high as you'd probably expect it to, given the 944 horsepower. As far as PP, it's very high for a street car, 621, especially for a street car with no flat floor to speak of. Now, we've already mentioned the value for money, but that is primarily due to straight line performance. The amount of performance for that price is very difficult to beat. But what about around the track? Because although you see loads, and I mean loads, thousands of people using this car for top speed racing and drag racing, and some for drifting, though not as much, you don't really see that many people using it as a track car. There are definitely people who do, but it tends to be more for fun rather than, say, PP relevant competition. If people are allowed to use a Supra in its fully tuned form, then fans of the car often will. If though you're looking to race at say 500 pp levels or 525 or 550 or whatever, you very rarely see people using the Supra for that. So the question is why? Does that mean it's not very good, or does that just mean that people don't perhaps think of it? Well, as a track car, the power as you'd probably expect in a street vehicle, a rear-wheel drive vehicle, can work against you. It has a tendency to eat its own tyres very quickly, which is understandable given the power and torque, and that's not really conducive to being a good track car. There are others which do the same, but not really to the same degree as the Supra. It really does eat tyres quickly, kind of like a Viper in fact in that regard. The handling is better, I would say, than you'd expect. It's not quite as tail happy as you might expect it to be, especially with the full power, and although it can definitely be made to drift very easily, when you want it to, it can actually put down a really good lap time. Now for a racing Supra, you'd expect that. That's what they're designed for. But they're running so much less power that it kind of goes without saying that they will be. For this road car, although it's definitely not a car that I would recommend on twisty circuits, not with full power anyway, it can cope with that power surprisingly well. 944 horsepower in any car is a lot to deal with, even in a race car. That's why you don't see race cars hardly ever running that kind of power. You have to be a pretty specialised vehicle to be able to do so. And in real life, piloting a 944 horsepower Supra around something like the Nürburgring Ring would be difficult, to say the least, especially if you're pushing for the best possible lap time. It's pretty much a one-way ticket to death, in fact. But on the game, you of course don't need to worry about death, you can just enjoy that performance. Overall, people pretty much know that this is an amazing car, so it goes without saying, you should definitely try it out. But that's it overall for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.